Before the story begins, I want to welcome you. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and tell me what state or country you're listening from. I love seeing where my audience is watching. Now, this is the story of a woman who spent years building a man's future, only for him to forget who helped him rise. But what he didn't know was that the truth she carried would take everything from him and give her the life she deserved. Enjoy the story. I remember the exact instant my life folded in on itself. It wasn't dramatic like thunder or shouting. It was a quiet moment, an envelope sliding across a table inside a courtroom that smelled like dust, old varnish, and disappointment. I sat at the petitioner's table with my hands laced together, trying to keep them steady. They still shook despite my best effort. The place felt unforgiving, bright overhead lights washing every face into sharp angles, every emotion into something exposed. Across from me sat the man I used to love, Dorian Matthews, but he wasn't the man I had married years ago in a cramped municipal building. Back then, he had calloused hands from part-time construction work and a laugh that made me feel safe. The man in front of me was polished to perfection, a charcoal suit fitted like it had been sewn onto him, a glossy watch flashing on his wrist, a fresh fade and beard lined so clean it looked carved. Even the way he sat, chin high, arms folded, screamed a confidence he'd never had when we were scraping rent together. Next to me sat Maribel Rhodes, my best friend since childhood, and now, the attorney who refused to take a single dollar from me. She squeezed my hand beneath the table. Maribel always had that gift, knowing when I was about to break, even when I didn't show it. Dorian's attorney, a tall man with a slick grin and a voice meant for juries, rose and buttoned his jacket. "Your Honor," he said to Judge Rosalind Avery, a sharp-eyed black woman in her early 60s, "my client, Dr. Dorian Matthews of Northbridge Heart Institute, has achieved his professional stature entirely through self-discipline and intellectual rigor." The word entirely hit like a slap. The attorney continued, pacing with the confidence of a man who believed every sentence he said deserved applause. "Mrs. Linton, that was my married name, though it felt foreign now. Worked a series of unskilled positions over the years. Cashier, retail associate, hospitality staff. She contributed little of economic value to the household. Unskilled. Little of economic value." Each phrase landed on my skin like ice water. I looked at Dorian. He didn't even blink. He nodded along with his lawyer as if all of this were simply factual, obvious, reasonable. This was the man I used to kiss goodnight after 14-hour shifts. This was the man I took care of when he couldn't afford new clothes for his hospital rotations. This was the man who once told me he couldn't survive medical school without me. The attorney clicked his pen and continued, "Given Mrs. Linton's minimal financial contribution, Dr. Matthews proposes a fair and generous arrangement, temporary support of $600 per month for 18 months as a courtesy." A courtesy. As if the 6 years I'd carried our life on my back were a favor he could acknowledge or dismiss at will. "And, of course," the attorney added, "she may retain her personal effects and her vehicle, a 2012 Ford Focus." I felt the floor tilt under me. Judge Avery's face remained unreadable. Maribel's did not. Her jaw tightened, and the look she gave Dorian's attorney could have burned through steel. When the attorney finally sat, his smug expression settling comfortably across his features, Maribel rose. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp, "I have evidence that will correct the narrative presented here today." Judge Avery nodded. "Proceed, Ms. Rhodes." This was the moment. The one we had prepared for in Maribel's tiny office, surrounded by stacks of papers and old laptop chargers, drinking cheap coffee, and piecing together 6 years of my life. Maribel touched my hand. A signal. With my heart pounding loud enough to drown out my thoughts, I reached into the large beige tote at my feet. The envelope inside felt heavy, not because of the paper, but because it held every sacrifice I had ever swallowed in silence. I stood. My knees trembled. Each step felt like I was walking underwater. The courtroom went silent. Even Dorian looked uneasy now, his confidence flickering like a candle in a draft. I placed the envelope into Judge Avery's hand. She gave a curt nod, then opened it. And everything changed. Her eyes scanned the first page. Neutral. Professional. Second page. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Third page. Her lips twitched. Fourth page. She looked up at Dorian with a slowness that made my pulse jump. Then Judge Avery did something I had never seen a judge do in my entire life. She laughed. Not a polite, joke-at-a-dinner laugh. A real, uncontrollable, shaking shoulders laugh that echoed off the courtroom walls. Gasps rippled across the room. Dorian's posture collapsed. His lawyer stiffened. Across the gallery, Dorian's new companion, Valencia Monroe, the ambitious biotech executive with designer everything, shifted nervously in her seat. Judge Avery wiped her eyes and finally regained composure, though a smile still lingered. "Mr. Matthews," she said, her voice sharpening, "I have presided over family court for over 2 decades. I have seen pettiness, deceit, and audacity. But what I am looking at here today takes a special kind of nerve." Dorian's face drained of color. "But let us rewind," she continued, settling the papers neatly. "Mrs. Linton, tell the court how this marriage began. Ms. Rhodes, walk us through the timeline, all of it." Maribel placed her hand gently on my shoulder and stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Let us start 8 years ago." And just like that, the courtroom faded. We were pulled back, before the lies, before the arrogance, before the money changed him, back when we were 2 broke newlyweds in a tiny apartment, believing poverty was temporary and love was forever. That was before he forgot who built him. That was before he erased the woman who had carried him through the dark. That was before the truth inside that envelope turned his confidence to dust. 8 years earlier, long before Dorian wore designer suits and corrected my grammar at dinner parties, we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Richmond Heights, Georgia. A building so old the hallway lights flickered like haunted lamps, and the plumbing knocked every time someone upstairs flushed. Back then, it didn't matter. Back then, love was bigger than the cracked tiles and the peeling paint. At that time, Dorian was 23 and I, Serena Linton, was 21, a second-year student at Midland Community College, still dreaming about finishing my degree in digital media. We got married quietly in a courthouse with fluorescent lights humming over us while Maribel signed as a witness and cried harder than I did. Dorian had just been accepted into the Mid-South University School of Medicine, his lifelong dream, the thing he'd whispered about since we were teenagers sitting on park swings. But that dream came with a cost we could not afford. We were already juggling rent, groceries, and overdue bills. His student loans covered tuition but barely touched anything else. Even with his part-time overnight stock job at a warehouse and my weekend retail shifts, we were drowning. I still remember the night it broke us. We sat at our tiny kitchen table, a shaky thrift store thing with one uneven leg, surrounded by open bills. Dorian kept rubbing his face with both hands, the way he did whenever panic took over. "Reen," he murmured, voice tired, "I don't know how we're going to keep up. Tuition, rent, utilities, and my loan refund won't stretch." I stared at the numbers. I'd been staring at them for hours. They didn't lie. "We can't make it," I whispered. "Not like this." Silence filled the room. Then I said the thing that changed everything. "I can pause school." Dorian's head snapped up. "What? No. Absolutely not." "It's just for a year," I insisted. "Maybe 2. I can work full-time. I can get another job. You finish school, then residency, and once you're stable, I'll go back." His eyes softened, but filled with guilt. "Serena, you've wanted that degree for so long." "I'll still get it," I said, squeezing his hand. "Your dream is urgent. Mine can wait." We talked until sunrise, him begging me not to do it, me insisting it was the only way. And the next week, I withdrew from college. The week after that, I became a full-time cashier at Freshway Market, picking up weekend shifts bussing tables at Riverfront Deli. At first, it wasn't unbearable. Hard, yes, but we were young enough to think struggle proved our love. Dorian would come home from long days of anatomy labs and fall asleep with his head in my lap. He'd rub my tired shoulders while I ate leftover fries after a double shift. We promised each other it was temporary. but temporary turned into permanent. By Dorian's second year, the cost of medical supplies, textbooks, exam fees, and transportation began to crush us. So I added a third job, cleaning office buildings from 7 p.m. until midnight 4 days a week. My routine became muscle memory. Wake at 5:30, work 7 to 3, nap for 30 minutes, clean offices from 5 to 9, wait tables from 10 to 3 a.m., sleep for 3 hours, repeat. The exhaustion became a constant hum in my bones. My hands cracked from cleaning chemicals. I lost 15 pounds without trying. I slept sitting up sometimes because lying down hurt. My classmates stopped calling because I could never meet up. But Dorian? He was thriving. Top of his cohort. Faculty favorite. Perfect exam scores. Praise everywhere he turned. And he always told me, just a little longer, Reen. When I become Dr. Matthews, I'll make it up to you. You'll never have to lift a finger again. I believed him. I believed him more than I believed in myself. But somewhere in his third year, he changed. Maybe it was the influence of his wealthy classmates, children of surgeons, executives, and donors. They wore fresh-pressed outfits to class while I pulled on the same 2 thrift store uniforms, rotating them to hide the fading seams. Dorian came home from a study session one night and looked at me differently, like he was seeing me through someone else's eyes. "You don't try to look nice anymore," he said suddenly. I blinked. "I just came from the deli. I have another shift at the law offices in an hour." "I know, but just because you're busy doesn't mean you can't put in effort. Other guys' partners always look put together." Effort? My entire existence was effort. But I swallowed the hurt. I wore drugstore mascara, even though it burned my eyes from fatigue. I stayed up at 2 a.m. watching hairstyle tutorials. I saved tip money for a $32 dress from a clearance rack. I even tried to join conversations at his events, though I had no idea what gala donors or surgical interns were talking about. Yet none of it mattered. He flinched whenever I came near him in my work uniforms. He stopped inviting me to functions where appearance mattered. He listened to his classmates talk about their partners' consulting firms and MBA programs. That's when he began bringing up Dr. Celeste Harmon, his attending, and Ms. Valencia Monroe, the hospital executive who ran training seminars. "Valencia is brilliant," he'd say casually. "Celeste says my technique is impressive. Did you hear what Valencia accomplished last year?" Their names were always dripping with admiration. Mine was always followed by a sigh. By the time Dorian reached his final year, the distance between us had become measurable, like something you could stretch between 2 fingers. He slept in the guest room because my 4 a.m. alarms disrupted his sleep. He stopped eating the meals I packed for him. He would spend hours texting people he never mentioned. Whenever he came home late, he smelled faintly of perfume that didn't belong to me. But the final shift happened on the day he graduated. A warm day in June, the kind where sunlight feels like hope. I wore that clearance rack blue dress. I did my makeup with shaky hands. I took photos of him in his gown, telling him I was proud. So proud. But when he crossed the stage as Dr. Dorian Matthews, the look on his face wasn't one of gratitude. It was glory, triumph, ego. After the ceremony, I found him surrounded by people wearing clothes I couldn't afford. When I touched his arm, he turned with annoyance, not joy. He introduced me quickly, too quickly, to Valencia. An elegant woman in a pearl-white suit with nails shaped like polished glass. "Dr. Matthews is exceptional," she told him, smiling in a way I felt in my stomach. "We need surgeons like him. Our compensation package is competitive. Very competitive." Dorian beamed at her while I stood there, invisible. And when I whispered that I had to leave early for a shift, because we still needed the money until his first check cleared, he looked at me like I'd embarrassed him. That was the beginning of the unraveling. The luxury apartment he insisted on, the expensive car, the boutique gym, the curated image. Everything mattered, except me. He no longer saw sacrifice. He saw a woman beneath his new world. And by the time our 8th anniversary arrived, I think he had already chosen who he wanted to be and who he wanted to leave behind. Our 8th wedding anniversary was the night everything in me split open. I'd spent weeks scraping together tip money from Freshway and juggling split shifts at Riverfront Deli so I could create one beautiful evening, one night where maybe, just maybe, we could remember who we were before ambition twisted itself between us. I left my cashier's shift early, losing a half-day's pay because I wanted everything to be perfect. I bought ingredients for Dorian's favorite dish, honey-roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes, a meal I used to make for him in our early years when we couldn't afford restaurant meals. I lit dollar store candles, arranged them around the dining table in our overpriced River District apartment, and put on the only nice dress I owned. By 6 o'clock, the meal was ready. By 6:30, the candles were half burned. By 7 o'clock, I was checking the clock every minute. At 7:45, I finally texted, "Are you on your way home? Dinner's ready." He responded at 8:32, "At the hospital. Consultation emergency." My heart sank, but I told myself that surgeons had unpredictable schedules. I kept the food warm, lit another round of candles, and waited. Again. At 9:52, I heard the front door. Dorian walked in, but he wasn't wearing scrubs or his white coat. He was wearing a midnight black tailored suit and cologne that smelled expensive, layered with a faint trace of someone else's perfume. A floral scent. Warm vanilla. Not mine. He didn't look at the table. Didn't notice the candles. Didn't see the effort. He just loosened his tie and walked toward the bedroom like the space we shared was merely a hallway. "Dorian," I said softly, "I made dinner. It's our anniversary." He paused. Barely. His eyes slid over the table. The meal, the candles, the cake I'd purchased with 2 days' worth of tips. Everything. His expression didn't soften. "I told you I had a consultation." "You're wearing a suit," I whispered. He exhaled heavily, annoyed I'd even commented. There was a meeting afterward. A professional dinner. "On our anniversary?" My voice cracked. He shrugged off his jacket. "Some things are more important than a date on a calendar, Serena." That sentence broke something inside me. "Please," I asked, "just sit with me for 10 minutes. The food is still warm." He didn't even look back. "I'm not hungry," he said. "I already ate. At that professional dinner." I stood there in that clearance rack dress with the candlelight flickering across untouched plates, feeling so small, so unseen, that my chest physically hurt. I followed him to the bedroom, desperate for clarity. "Dorian, we need to talk." He didn't stop unbuttoning his shirt. "Not tonight. I'm tired. We never talk anymore. You're always gone. You're always with colleagues or at events or..." He turned sharply. "Or what? Say it." My throat tightened. "Or with her. Valencia. You talk about her constantly. You go to events with her. You smell like perfume that isn't mine." He laughed. Not kindly. Not gently. A cold, sharp, belittling laugh that cut right through my ribs. "Serena," he said, shaking his head, "this is exactly why I don't bring you around anymore. You're insecure. Paranoid. You don't understand the professional world. You make everything emotional." "I make everything emotional?" I whispered. "I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I sacrificed my education. I sacrificed my health. I sacrificed everything so you could climb." "And nobody forced you," he snapped. "You made your own choices. Stop trying to guilt me for something you decided." I stumbled backward like I'd been physically hit. He stepped closer, anger flaring in his eyes. "You want to know the truth?" he said. "You stopped trying years ago. Look at your clothes. Look at your hair. Look at your life. You stayed stuck while I evolved. I became someone. You didn't." I swallowed hard. "What happened to you, Dorian?" He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "I grew up," he said. "And you stayed the same. I'm a surgeon now at one of the top hospitals in the region. I'm building a real future. And you're still punching time clocks at jobs that lead nowhere." "I'm working to support us," I whispered. "I don't need your contribution," he said, voice rising again. "I don't need you handing me cheap meals or your thrift store clothes or your constant exhaustion reminding me of where I came from." Silence swallowed the room. Then he said it. The sentence that shattered whatever was left. Your simplicity embarrasses me. Embarrasses
Me.
I stood frozen. Me. The woman who'd kept him afloat. Me. The one who carried his dreams when they were too heavy for him. Me. The one who loved him when he had nothing but potential. He walked to the closet and pulled out a suitcase. Dorian, what are you doing?
He didn't look at me.
I've been thinking about this for months, he said calmly, almost gently. We're not compatible anymore. You don't fit into my life. My world is moving forward. You're holding me back. Because I'm not rich? Because I'm not polished enough? He zipped the suitcase. Because you're not the woman I want beside me anymore. And then he delivered the final blow with the coldness of a surgeon cutting into anesthetized skin. I want a divorce. I couldn't speak. He added, my lawyer will send the paperwork. You can stay here for a few weeks while you figure out where to go. After that, I'm selling the place. He paused at the doorway, suitcase in hand. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I did appreciate what you did back then. But gratitude doesn't build the future I need. Then he walked out, leaving the candles burning, the food untouched, and me standing alone in the home I'd helped build. That night, the foundation of my life cracked apart. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I worked my shifts like a ghost. I slept curled up in the space he used to occupy. I stared at the walls until morning. I didn't cry, not at first. Shock makes the body numb. Then the divorce papers arrived. He offered me $10,000 as a generous settlement. No shared assets. No retirement. No investments. No acknowledgement of my work. The legal language said I had made no substantial contribution. Like I never existed. Like my sacrifice was disposable. The night I read those words, I walked to the bathroom mirror. I was 27, but I looked a decade older. Dark circles. Chapped hands. Shoulders hunched from years of working 3 jobs. And I broke. I slid to the floor and cried until my ribs ached. That was the night Maribel found me, shaking, drained, collapsed on the tiles. She held me, and then she said quietly, we're not letting him destroy you. I promise you that. And I believed her, because Maribel had fire in her bones, and she was about to use every spark of it to save my life. Maribel didn't wait. She didn't hesitate. The moment she found me on that bathroom floor, broken, breathless, and believing I had nothing left, she shifted into the version of herself I'd always known existed, the storm in heels. Over the next 3 weeks, she became a one-woman legal army. She turned my dining table into a war room. Stacks of folders, laptops, highlighters, sticky notes, coffee cups everywhere, determination in her eyes. I need everything, she told me, fingers already flying across her keyboard. Bank statements, pay stubs, lease agreements, any messages, screenshots, receipts. If you ever bought so much as a pencil for that man, we're using it. I didn't think we'd find much. I was wrong. Maribel subpoenaed every financial record tied to our marriage, every bank transaction, every lease, every piece of tuition documentation. One night, while digging through a storage bin I had nearly thrown away during the move, she found something that stopped both of us cold. Serena, she said slowly, pulling out a folder with worn edges, come look at this. Inside was a loan agreement from 4 years earlier, when Dorian's tuition almost fell through. The memory rushed back. He'd been panicking because his financial aid was delayed. If he missed the deadline, he'd lose his placement in med school. So I applied for a personal loan through Heritage State Bank. $38,000 in my name only. Every dollar went straight to his tuition and clinical fees. And taped to the back of the loan agreement was something even more powerful. A handwritten, signed promissory note from Dorian. I will repay Serena Linton the full amount after residency. Dorian Matthews. The ink had faded slightly, but the signature was unmistakable. Maribel's eyes gleamed. He forgot about this, she said. Perfect. Once Maribel knew what she was looking for, she hunted like a wolf. Bank statements showed. I paid every rent payment for 6 years. I covered 90% of groceries and utilities. I paid for all his early medical supplies. I purchased every single textbook. Lease records showed each apartment, from our shoebox starter home to the River District, was under my name because Dorian's credit was destroyed from student loans. Witness statements. Old neighbors and landlords remembered seeing me rushing out at sunrise, juggling jobs, carrying laundry baskets, scraping ice off our windshield while Dorian slept in. Old text messages. Hundreds of messages where Dorian thanked me for keeping us afloat, paying everything, and sacrificing so much. But then came the discovery that would crack the case wide open. Maribel got access to Dorian's financial disclosures and found an electronic transfer dated 3 months before he asked for the divorce. $62,000 transferred directly to Valencia Monroe Innovations, LLC, his girlfriend's biotech venture. The memo line read, seed investment. With marital funds. Without my consent. Maribel laughed, not because it was funny, but because the arrogance was unbelievable. Oh, this is going to sing in court, she said. I couldn't sleep. My stomach was in knots. I kept imagining the judge siding with him, the polished surgeon, the hospital's golden child, the man with a clean smile and a rehearsed sob story. What if it's not enough? I whispered, staring at the ceiling. Maribel closed her laptop and knelt beside my chair. Serena, listen to me carefully, she said. You are the reason that man has a career. You supported him while he climbed a ladder you built. Her voice softened. This case isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. And tomorrow, that courtroom will recognize you. I nodded, but fear still twisted in my chest. I wore the blue dress from Dorian's graduation, the same dress I wore when he first showed he was ashamed of me. But this time, it meant something different. It wasn't a reminder of his success. It was a symbol of mine. At the courthouse, Maribel handed me the manila envelope, the one holding every piece of evidence. When the moment is right, she whispered, give this to Judge Avery. I breathed deeply, lifted my chin, and walked into courtroom 3B. Dorian sat across from me with the arrogance of a man who believed he'd already won. His suit was crisp. His silver tie glinted. His confidence was almost theatrical. His lawyer opened with that smug tone again. Your Honor, Mrs. Linton's contribution to the marriage was minimal at best. Minimal. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. But then Maribel nodded. It was time. I stood, legs trembling, and carried the envelope to Judge Avery. I placed it in her hands. I walked back to my seat. And then I watched a miracle unfold. Page 1. Neutral expression. Page 2. Raised eyebrows. Page 3. A tiny smirk. Page 4. Her lips tightened like she was biting back laughter. Page 5. Judge Avery leaned back in her chair and laughed. An open, genuine, uncontrollable laugh that spread across the entire courtroom. Dorian's face fell. His lawyer panicked. Valencia stiffened in the gallery like a statue. The judge wiped her eyes and shook her head. When she finally spoke, her tone wasn't amused anymore. It was cold steel. Mr. Matthews, she said, I have never seen such blatant misrepresentation in my career. The entire room froze. And I knew in that moment that everything was about to change. Judge Avery didn't hold back. With the manila envelope resting in front of her like a sacred text, she folded her hands and glared at Dorian with a kind of authority that made the entire courtroom hold its breath. Mr. Matthews, she said, voice slow and slicing, let us revisit the truth you conveniently erased. The quiet in the room was absolute. She lifted the promissory note, the one with Dorian's signature promising to repay the $38,000 loan I took out for his tuition. This, Judge Avery said, is a legally binding document. Your wife funded your education when your own financial aid failed. She took the risk. She took the debt. She took the burden. And you benefited. Dorian's mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. No words came out. His lawyer mumbled something, but Judge Avery raised one hand sharply. Sit down, counselor. He sat. She continued flipping through the evidence like a professor grading a failing student's test. Bank records show Mrs. Linton paid every bill, every expense, every necessity for 6 years. Meanwhile, Mr. Matthews contributed nothing. Not rent, not utilities, not groceries, not a single textbook. She held up a page of highlighted records. And then we reached this. The entire courtroom leaned forward. The $62,000 transfer to Ms. Monroe's business account. Judge Avery's eyes moved to Valencia, still in the gallery, her posture rigid, her expression cracked at the edges. Mr. Matthews, this is called financial infidelity. You used marital funds to invest in your girlfriend's company during your marriage without disclosure. That is not only unethical, it is illegal. Dorian stammered. It was a business opportunity. Using marital funds? Judge Avery asked sharply. To support your mistress's company? Valencia's face dropped, her confidence dissolving into humiliation. Judge Avery set the papers down and stared directly at Dorian. Let me summarize, she said, voice firm. You married a woman who believed in you when you had nothing. She worked 3 jobs. She abandoned her education. She poured her youth, her body, her health, and her dreams into supporting your rise. Her tone hardened, and as soon as you had a taste of money and prestige, you decided she wasn't worthy of the world you stepped into. Dorian's face burned red. Your arrogance is astounding, Judge Avery said, and this court will not reward it. The room went still as Judge Avery delivered her judgment. Keycap 1, Mr. Matthews, you will repay the full $38,000 personal loan, plus accumulated interest. Total due, $54,000. Keycap 2, Mrs. Linton is entitled to half of all marital assets, including your River District condo, retirement funds, and investment accounts. Keycap 3, because she sacrificed her education and earning years for your advancement, you will pay rehabilitative support of $3,800 per month for 5 years. Keycap 4, the $62,000 improperly transferred to Ms. Monroe must be returned to the marital estate and split equally. Finally, Judge Avery closed the folder. By my math, she said, Mrs. Linton will leave this marriage with approximately $380,000, plus ongoing monthly support. She leaned forward, her gaze sharp enough to cut. And I hope you remember this, Mr. Matthews. Success built on someone else's sacrifice is not yours alone. You owe her far more than you ever admitted. This court is simply forcing you to acknowledge it. Her gavel slammed. Court is adjourned. The room exploded into whispers. Dorian shot out of his chair, furious. This is ridiculous. She didn't do the surgeries. She didn't go to school. Judge Avery didn't even look up. And she made it possible. Her voice cracked through the noise like thunder. For the first time in 8 years, Dorian fell silent. Outside the courthouse, while cameras flashed and attorneys shuffled past, I paused at the steps, watching the scene unfold like poetic justice. Valencia was furious. You told me she was insignificant, she hissed at Dorian. You told me this was simple. Now I have to give back the entire investment. Valencia, please. No, she snapped. I'm not risking my company for your lies. Fix your own mess. She turned and walked away, heels clicking across the concrete. She didn't look back. Dorian called after her, desperate, shaken, undone. But she was gone. Then came Dorian's lawyer, whispering rapidly. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Dorian's shoulders sink lower, lower, lower. He finally understood. Appealing would cost him more money, more time, more humiliation. He stood alone, a man who had forgotten his roots, abandoned the woman who built his foundation, and lost everything he tried to hoard. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a costume. 6 months later, everything had changed. Not because of Dorian, but because of me. I enrolled in business school at Richmond Community College. My first semester report card came back. Straight A's. Dean's List. I moved into a cozy 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. I paid off all my debts. I gained back weight, slept real hours, ate real meals, and rediscovered parts of myself that I'd buried under exhaustion. I even started doing my hair again, not for anyone else, but because I liked seeing myself look alive. Maribel and I celebrated with lattes at a coffee shop near campus. Look at you, she said, beaming. Serena Linton, future business owner. I laughed. I don't know about all that. I do, she said firmly. Start your own firm someday. I'll be your first investor. I looked out the window at the street bustling with students and commuters and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Walking home that day, I passed Northbridge Heart Institute, Dorian's hospital. Through the lobby windows, I caught a glimpse of white coats rushing around. Somewhere inside, Dorian was performing surgeries, saving lives, impressing supervisors. But when I looked at that building, I felt nothing. No longing. No sadness. No anger. Just silence.
And peace.
On my walk home, my phone buzzed. An email. Congratulations. You have been awarded the Phoenix Scholarship, full tuition for next academic year. I stopped walking and smiled. Not the smile of someone who won something. The smile of someone who finally remembered her worth. For 6 years, I built someone else's future.
Now,
I'm building my own. Brick by brick. Class by class. Dream by dream. A future not rooted in sacrifice, but in self-respect. A future not built for a man, but for me. And this time, the foundation is solid. Because I am solid. And I'll never let anyone make me forget my value again. When life tries to convince you that your value depends on who you carry, remember Serena Linton. She spent years pouring everything she had into someone else's future, and when he walked away, she thought she had nothing left. But sometimes the ending you fear is the beginning you needed. Serena didn't just survive, she rebuilt. She rose. She became the woman she once dreamed of being, but was too tired to become. She didn't win because she embarrassed him in court. She didn't win because the judge exposed the truth. She won because she finally chose herself. And that, my friends, is the kind of victory no one can take away. If this story moved you, if you felt her strength, if you've ever carried someone who forgot your value, please like, comment, and subscribe. You are not disposable. You are not invisible. Your worth is real, and it is yours. Stay tuned for more powerful stories, more justice, more transformation, and more tales that remind you you can rise again. And when you do, they'll wish they never underestimated you.